Dolorosa is one of the most famous streets in the world. And if you get a chance to visit Jerusalem, there's little doubt eventually you will find yourself walking on this very crowded, very narrow, very old street that marks the path that Jesus took to the cross. It's an emotional experience. And in a normal season of tourism, uncountable thousands of Christian pilgrims will slowly make their way along the famous Via Dolorosa, treasuring every step as if they were making the journey along the same stones where Jesus once walked. So, are you ready for a secret hidden in plain sight that might take some of the thrill out of this walk in Jerusalem? Here it is. Jesus never walked on this street. It's actually impossible. The streets of Jerusalem that Jesus knew are anywhere from 6 to 20 feet below today's old city streets of Jerusalem. You see, through the centuries, the city of Jerusalem has gotten taller, at least the old city has gotten taller as residents have rebuilt Jerusalem after earthquakes, wars, and massive remodeling projects by whoever was in charge of the city. Now, whatever way Jesus walked to the cross, whatever street it was, it's long been covered up by dirt, debris, and now an estimated 37,000 people who live in the old city today. Here's an example. In the Jewish quarter, archaeologists have dug down about 8 feet below Jerusalem's modern-day street level to uncover a street Jesus must have known. It cut a straight path through Jerusalem, giving it the name the Cardo, as if it were the main artery of the city, like cardiology. So there's little doubt that Jesus walked on these stones. But had you come to Jerusalem just 50 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to see the Cardo. In another example, archaeologists have uncovered a first-century street that once ran alongside the western side of the Temple Mount retaining wall. Some of this 2,000-year-old street even runs underneath the famous Western Wall Plaza where so many people pray today. Excavation of this street and the buildings Jesus would have known along that street continues to this day. In another location, underneath the Sisters of Zion convent, you can walk on a Roman street that is nearly that old. These first-century stones are about 20 feet below the very beginning of today's Via Dolorosa walk, where so many pilgrims pick up their own crosses and begin to make that emotional journey as they go by the stations of the cross. You know, even if we can't touch the exact stones Jesus touched as he made his way to Golgotha, it is an emotional experience to walk the maze of streets known as the Way of Suffering, or in Latin, the Via Dolorosa. I promise you from personal experience, if this is your first visit to Jerusalem, you will likely be overwhelmed with emotion as you remember the day Jesus gave up his life for the sins of the world. And with that, I'd like to welcome you to the very first episode of a special series of messages on our videocast that we're calling Secrets from the Via Dolorosa. Now, these lessons are designed to be a way to help us prepare for this year's remembrance of the crucifixion and then our celebration of the resurrection. As always, there are secrets hidden in plain sight all along the ancient paths that lead to the cross. Now, you may want to dive a little deeper into this series by reading my latest book, which is called Secrets from the Via Dolorosa. You can follow the links on our website, secretsfromtheancientpast.com or experienceisraelnow.com if you'd like to own your own copy. Boy, I hope you will. Of all my books, it's my favorite. And the photos taken by my friend William Hahn really make these lessons come alive. Now, perhaps you've already walked along the Via Dolorosa and discovered another secret hidden in plain sight. But if you ever get a chance to do that, if you've not yet walked there, you'll soon discover that it's not really just a single street. Several streets make a twisting trail through the old city of Jerusalem, and they lead to a place called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Eventually, we're going to get there in this series. It's a journey of perhaps only half a mile. But as you know, the Via Dolorosa means a way of suffering, a way of grief, a way of sorrows. But for Jesus, the suffering he knew relating to the cross was a journey that took a lot longer than half a mile, and it certainly lasted a lot longer than a single day. Jesus obviously knew he was headed to the cross at least a year before Good Friday arrived. It was at least a year, perhaps a little longer than that, when he first told his disciples about the cross. And at the time, he was more than 100 miles north of Jerusalem. And here's something else. There may have been snow on the ground all around him as he began talking, about the Via Dolorosa. Matthew tells us that Jesus visited the region of Caesarea Philippi just before Jesus took Simon Peter, James, and John to a nearby high mountain. And that's the only name of it, a high mountain. Now that's where a supernatural event that we call the Transfiguration took place. It was there that Jesus had a conversation with Moses and Elijah. While the three of them spoke, the clothes of Jesus turned into a brilliant white. And since Caesarea Philippi, where Jesus had just been, according to Matthew's gospel, is at the base of Mount Hermon, the highest mountain in Israel, it's only logical that Mount Hermon was almost certainly the location of the Transfiguration. And Mount Hermon is covered in snow for much of the year. Today, it's a great place to ski or play in the snow for modern Israeli families. And snow may have also played a part in that brilliant white background of the Transfiguration event some 2,000 years ago. While we're speaking about the Transfiguration, we should stop for a moment and note that many people think the Transfiguration happened far south of Mount Hermon at a place called Mount Tabor. The reason? Mount Tabor was located in the Galilee region, and it was a much easier place to visit for the first Christian pilgrims who began coming to the land of the Bible. In fact, a bishop from Jerusalem wrote in the year 348, that's more than 16 centuries ago, that he preferred Mount Tabor over Mount Hermon. And there's little wonder. The journey north on the back of a donkey would have taken him several days to get to the actual site of the Transfiguration. It was a lot easier to climb Mount Tabor and remember the Transfiguration there. There's a church of the Transfiguration that was built in 1924, again, just a century ago, that helps continue this tradition of remembering the Transfiguration in the region of the Galilee at Mount Tabor. Unfortunately, many tourists who visit Israel today assume that because there's a church called the Church of the Transfiguration built on this location, then that must be where the event actually happened. I say all of that because that makes Mount Tabor and its beautiful church a great example of how traditional sites in Israel sometimes have nothing at all to do with the actual location of events in the Bible. And that will come into play a lot all along the way of the Via Dolorosa and in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Traditional locations mark every step of the path along the old city's Via Dolorosa. You know, there's even a vibrant argument over where exactly Jesus was crucified, where exactly his body was laid, and where the resurrection took place. Those traditional locations can cause a great deal of confusion to those of us who are looking for secrets from the land of the Bible. So, for the moment, return to Mount Hermon with me. You know, somewhere near Caesarea Philippi, Jesus began walking to the cross. Luke's gospel tells us that. In fact, Luke says, as the time approached for him to be taken up to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem. Now, according to the Bible, Jesus was far north of Mount Tabor at that moment and more than 100 miles north of Jerusalem. He had a long, long way to go and a long time to go before he would reach Golgotha. He would suffer all along the way, knowing the outcome of this journey. It was the Via Dolorosa for Jesus, even 100 miles north of the location of the street that we know today. You know, Luke is a master wordsmith. He's got an incredible Greek vocabulary. And he said that Jesus resolutely turned his face toward Jerusalem after the Transfiguration. He resolutely turned his face toward the city where he would lose his life, and he refused to turn back. He had his mind made up. His feet were on the path. After his talk with Moses and Elijah, Jesus was simply never the same again. He acted as if the cross was the only option for his life. Now notice something else that Luke tells us. He spoke of a day when Jesus would be taken up to heaven or received up to heaven. That sounds a lot like the ascension, the final supernatural event in the earthly life of Jesus. But you know, the cross was the focal point of this passage. It was the cross that dominated the mind and the words of Jesus. He didn't speak about his ascension. He spoke constantly about the crucifixion. So why would Luke bring up the idea of the ascension, say that Jesus was going to Jerusalem so he could be taken up to heaven? You know, Luke uses a lot of medical words in the Gospel of Luke, which is why many scholars believe he might have been a doctor. And his phrase of being taken up or received up, It's a bit of a medical term. If a person had the unfortunate incident of breaking an arm, for instance, a doctor would set the bone back into place and then put the arm in a sling or bind it close to the body. You see, the broken bone would be taken up to a place where it could heal. And Luke surely purchased his medical supplies from the market. When he made a purchase, he might have asked for a receipt. Again, the Greek word he used right here could also apply to using a receipt or having a receipt in the market. That's the word they use for it. If you pay your money, you can receive up the goods for yourself, and the receipt proves that you made the purchase. That's a bit awkward going from one language to another, especially when you're spanning a 2,000-year gap, but it does work right here. Jesus was going to be received up in Jerusalem. When he would die on the cross for the sins of the world, you see, the world, as broken as it is, was finally given a place where it could be healed. It could be received up. In the process, Jesus would be the ultimate receipt paid for our sin. He would be, it's a little awkward to hear it this way, but receipted up to heaven. He would give his life for people just like you and me, and if you choose to accept that gift, if you choose to trust him, Jesus is your receipt of grace. As the old hymn says, he paid it all. Jesus began to walk toward the cross, even while he was at the base of Mount Hermon. Every step he took was taking him directly to Jerusalem, resolutely taking him to his own crucifixion. I believe that made the entire journey his own personal Via Dolorosa. When we come back next week, we're going to look at that journey that Jesus took to Jerusalem. It's a journey loaded with secrets from all those ancient paths. I hope you'll join me then, and I hope you'll join me throughout this series. I'm looking forward to taking you down these ancient paths and uncovering those secrets from the Via Dolorosa. I'm Andy Cook.